history isn't just about wars and kings. It's not only grand discoveries or famous revolutions. Sometimes, it's far, far stranger. Tonight, we're uncovering 10 bizarre historical crimes that sound almost too unusual to be real. From imposter princesses to cult-like devotion, from strange fraud schemes to dark secrets hidden behind respectable doors. These stories slipped through the cracks of time, but they're every bit as gripping as the headlines we remember. Settle in. This one's going to be a strange ride. Number 10. The escaped convict who became a princess. In 1771, Sarah Wilson, a maid in the British royal household, was sentenced to death for stealing royal jewelry, a portrait of Queen Charlotte, and one of the Queen's gowns. At the last moment, her sentence was reduced. Instead of execution, she was transported to America and sold into servitude on a plantation. But Sarah wasn't planning to stay. Not long after arriving, she escaped. And here's where things get truly strange. Somehow, she still had the royal dress, the jewels, and the portrait. So she reinvented herself. Sarah began introducing herself as Princess Susanna Caroline Matilda, claiming to be Queen Charlotte's sister, secretly exiled after a scandal, and people believed her. For 2 full years, she lived comfortably, welcomed by wealthy colonial families eager to impress royalty. She received gifts, attention, even admiration, until the plantation owner who had purchased her discovered the truth. A reward was offered. She was captured and returned. But even that didn't stop her. 2 years later, she switched identities with another woman and escaped again, eventually marrying a British Army officer. Remarkably, she was never formally convicted of impersonation. In 1774, a Rhode Island newspaper called her the most surprising genius of the female sex ever obliged to visit America. Not bad for someone who started as a condemned thief. Number 9. Margaret Bill Allen's unexplained crime. Margaret Allen was born in 1906, the 20th of 22 children. From a young age, Margaret rejected traditional gender roles. She preferred physical labor, wore men's clothing, and later began going by the name Bill. In the 1930s, she even claimed to have undergone a medical procedure that made her male, something extremely unlikely for that time period. Today, Margaret's identity would be viewed through a very different lens. But in the 1940s, society saw her as eccentric, even disruptive. Then, in 1948, something happened that still puzzles historians. An elderly neighbor stopped by Margaret's home to borrow sugar. What followed was sudden and fatal. Margaret later confessed, saying she had acted on impulse. Her explanation: "I was in one of my funny moods. There was no clear motive, no long-standing feud, just a moment that escalated beyond reason." Margaret was sentenced to death and executed in 1949. A tragic case that left behind more questions than answers. Number 8. The couple with a dark secret. In 1861, a French woman named Marie Pichon escaped an attack in the woods and identified her assailant, Martin Dumollard. Police searched his property. What they uncovered revealed a disturbing pattern. Multiple women had disappeared after being promised work. Authorities eventually linked Dumollard to at least 6 murders. Evidence suggested even more victims. But what shocked investigators further was the role of his wife. Clothing belonging to the victims was found inside their home, and Mrs. Dumollard had reportedly worn some of it. She was later sentenced to hard labor for her involvement. Martin Dumollard was executed in 1862. It's believed he may have been one of France's earliest documented serial offenders, luring vulnerable women with promises of employment. A grim reminder that exploitation has often hidden behind opportunity. Number 7. The Butcher of Berlin. In 1920s Berlin, Karl Grossman lived in a rundown apartment in a crowded district. Neighbors often heard arguments and screams, but in those chaotic post-war years, such sounds weren't unusual. Then bodies began appearing in nearby waterways, dismembered. Police suspected a serial killer. In 1921, after another report of screams, authorities forced their way into Grossman's apartment and discovered evidence tying him to multiple killings. He was suspected of more than 20 murders. Before he could stand trial, Grossman took his own life in prison. Rumors later spread that he may have sold meat at a train station, raising horrifying speculation during a time of food shortages. Though some of those rumors remain unproven, his nickname endured, the Butcher of Berlin. Number 6. The insurance scheme that went too far. Martha Lowenstein inherited a fortune as a teenager from a wealthy guardian. But by the time she married Emil Merrick, the money was nearly gone. So they came up with a plan. To collect insurance money, they attempted to stage a serious accident involving Emil's leg. The scheme failed. Doctors determined the injury wasn't accidental, and charges followed. But the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, several people close to Martha died under suspicious circumstances. Authorities eventually exhumed bodies, discovering traces of thallium, a rare and toxic substance. Evidence showed Martha had purchased it repeatedly. She was convicted and executed in 1938. What began as financial desperation turned into something far darker. Number 5. the man who believed rituals would change his life. In the early 1970s, police in Germany investigated a series of grave disturbances. Then came something worse, multiple murders. The suspect, Kuno Hoffmann, was eventually arrested. Hoffmann had endured severe childhood abuse and significant isolation. He later became fixated on occult beliefs, convinced certain rituals would make him attractive and popular. When disturbing graves didn't produce the results he hoped for, his actions escalated. He was convicted and confined to a psychiatric institution for life. A tragic case where untreated trauma and delusions spiraled into irreversible harm. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please know there is help available. Resources and support lines can be found in the description below. You are not alone. Number 4. The preacher who demanded sacrifice. In 1823 Switzerland, Margaret Peter gathered a devoted religious following, many of them family members. She became convinced evil forces were present in her home. Her preaching grew increasingly extreme. Eventually, she declared that a sacrifice was required. What followed shocked the entire community. Both Margareta and her sister Elizabeth died as a result of events carried out by their followers. The group reportedly believed resurrection would follow. It did not. Authorities arrested the entire congregation. The house was demolished. Today, the only surviving details come from trial records. A chilling example of how unchecked belief can turn catastrophic. Number 3. The nun and the nobleman. In 17th century Italy, Mariana de Leyva was forced into a convent as a teenager. Years later, she began a secret relationship with a nobleman, Gianpaolo Osio. The affair led to scandal and eventually violence, as efforts were made to silence those who threatened exposure. Multiple murders were linked to the situation. Osio was sentenced to death, but later killed while in hiding. Mariana, known as Sister Virginia, was sentenced to life imprisonment in isolation. After many years, she was released, and reportedly lived a reformed religious life. A story of secrecy, guilt, and the consequences of power misused behind sacred walls. Number 2. The acid attack that shocked America. Dr. Geza de Caplani was a respected anesthesiologist and former freedom fighter. In 1962, just 5 weeks into his marriage, police responded to a horrific scene. Driven by jealousy and suspicion, he had attacked his wife with acid, causing devastating injuries. She survived for 33 days before passing away. De Caplani was sentenced to life in prison. Yet after 13 years, he was paroled and left the United States, eventually becoming a citizen elsewhere. Decades later, when confronted by reporters, he reportedly described it as one mistake, a phrase that still chills those familiar with the case. Number 1. The midwife no one suspected. In 1760s London, Elizabeth Brownrigg was known as a respectable midwife who worked with poor women. But inside her home, apprentices from the local workhouse endured shocking abuse. In 1767, neighbors alerted authorities after seeing one of the girls in critical condition. 14-year-old Mary Clifford later died from prolonged mistreatment. The trial exposed months of cruelty. Elizabeth Brownrigg was executed later that year. Her husband and son received comparatively minor sentences, a disturbing reminder that sometimes the most trusted figures can hide the darkest secrets. History doesn't just record empires and inventions. It also preserves the strange, the tragic, and the deeply unsettling. Each of these stories reminds us that human behavior can be unpredictable, shaped by greed, belief, desperation, identity, trauma, and sometimes motives we may never fully understand. Which story surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoy uncovering the stranger side of history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, the past isn't always what it seems.